third accusation made at Peter. Matthew, and after a while came to him they that stood by. Mark, and a little while after they that stood by said. Luke, and about the space of 1 hour. That's the most descriptive, so I'm going to go with that. And John just has the next question. One of the servants of the high priest says, and about the space of 1 hour. The only thing about Luke is that it's a little confusing to have the word after mentioned after the timing. About the space of 1 hour after, then without a comma, just goes right into another confidently affirmed. That confused me for a little while. I thought it might mean about the space of 1 hour, perhaps comma should be there, then after another confidently affirmed, saying, of a truth this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean, then it could go right into what happened after Peter said. But it doesn't say that. It says, and Peter said, which doesn't make as much sense. So the comma should be after the word after. And about the space of 1 hour after. But this is after what happened before, so I think the word after should start the sentence. This happened, then after an hour, this next thing happened. So I'm going to move the word after earlier, and that's how Mark has it. And a little after. Matthew's the same, and after. So I'm going to start with and from all three. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and. I think I'm going to add a little from Mark. A little after, then comma, then have more description about the space of 1 hour, so I can fit a little. A little while after, about the space of 1 hour. Yeah, that would work. So actually, is in Matthew. It's just after the word after. While from Matthew. Now after from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Now Luke, about the space of 1 hour. Matthew just has, came to him they that stood by. I would rather have they came to him instead of came to him they. Mark has they that stood by said again. So there's no came, just said, but it's the order I like. They that stood by. This brings us back to what the scenario is. They're standing around the fire, so I like that. I'm going to have stood. Luke has another confidently affirmed. From the way it looks in John, a kinsman of the servant whose ear Peter cut off. Since he says, did not I see you in the garden? That's a very specific one-on-one question. Luke has another, says, of a truth this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean. That's still one guy, so that would automatically make a group. The one from John, the one from Luke. Matthew and Mark have they. So it could be those two, or it could be a group here for Matthew and Mark. Then also the guy from John and the guy from Luke. The order I'm not sure of how it goes yet. They that stood by said again to Peter, surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean, and your speech agrees thereto. That's close to Luke. Of a truth, this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean. So in Luke, this one guy is speaking to the rest of them. This fellow was with him. He's not speaking to Peter saying this fellow. He is speaking about Peter saying this fellow. I think I'm going to save Luke for last, as like a hype man alongside the rest of them saying, yeah, that guy. So I'm going to start with Matthew. They that stood by came and said to Peter, surely you are also one of them, for your speech betrays you. So they're accusing him because of their suspicion of his accent or whatever. In Mark, they're saying two things. You are a Galilean, and your speech agrees thereto. So maybe those two different things. But his speech exposes him as a Galilean. So I think I should have them together. I could have the group saying, your speech exposes you as a Galilean. And I'll combine that from Luke. He is a Galilean. Then I'll have the hype man come in. Of a truth, this fellow was with him. But saying with him would make sense to be attached to what the guy said in John. I recognize you in the garden. That's when the guy would say, yep, that's right, he was with him in the garden. So I think I am going to start with Matthew and Mark. Your speech betrays you. We recognize your accent, you're a Galilean. Then the guy from John, didn't I see you in the garden? You're not just a Galilean, I even remember you in the garden. And then the hype man comes in, yep, of a truth, this guy was with him. Yeah, alright, that's good. So John, one of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman whose ear Peter cut off, says, okay, so all that I'll save after the first accusation. A little while after, at the space of an hour, they that stood by then came to him. Mark, they that stood by said. They that stood by is both Matthew and Mark. Matthew, I'll start, came to him. Then from Mark, said again. Came to him. I need an and. And said again. To Peter. In Mark it said again to Peter. Came again, or came and said again. Came again and said to Peter, or came and said again to Peter. I think I should have came and said again. Said is both. Again is Mark only. To is here in Mark. And it's twice in Matthew. I'll explain the addresses that it's from two places in Matthew. To, and Peter is named in both. Matthew, surely you also are. Mark, surely you are. Matthew says one of them, one in italics. Mark, one of them, one in italics. That's both. One of them. Mark says, for you are a Galilean. Matthew, for your speech betrays you. I'm going to save your speech betrays you and put you are a Galilean first. Luke, for he is a Galilean. So 4 is actually in 3. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, 4. And instead of Luke, he is a Galilean. They are speaking to him because they're saying to Peter. So it's not he is a Galilean, but just Mark, you are a Galilean. That's Mark and Luke. And your speech agrees thereto. So I'll have that. Your speech agrees thereto and betrays you. I'll save the and. Just have your speech agrees thereto, then and betrays you from Matthew. I'll combine your speech. So your speech is Matthew and Mark. Just Mark agrees thereto. And then from earlier in Mark, and now Matthew betrays you. So now the accusation from John of him being a disciple. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman whose ear Peter cut off, says. That wouldn't quite fit very well. I'd have to have and one says, or I could choose from Matthew, the very next word after what I use, then. Mark has, but he began to curse. Luke has his response being, and Peter said, so and. Then, but, or and. And what does John say? His response is, Peter then denied, so no introductory word. I think then from Matthew. So Matthew then. John, one of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, says, did not I see you in the garden with him? Now the last statement from Luke, which I think does fit very well as the final accusation lobbed at him. Another confidently affirmed, saying, of a truth this fellow also was with him. And I already used for he is the Galilean.